أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أفضل الأنبياء والمرسلين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين سيدنا وسندنا وشفيعنا مولانا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين اصطفاهم الله أجمعين. My respected brothers and sisters, I bid you all assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I start in the name of Allah Azza wa Jalla, the omniscient, omnipotent. All praise is due to Allah for giving us the beautiful ability to exist and comprehend everything around us. And truly through our existence we reach the highest ultimate purpose, which is our personal human growth, which is what we were created for, which is what the laws of the Quran are meant to give us, and which is what every law or Islamic law or tradition is meant to bring out within us, and that's the potential of human growth. When you examine a month like Ramadan, it's interesting because it hinges on this very concept of growing as a human being through different aspects of light. Now, one aspect being the aspect of staying away from food, another aspect being an aspect of worship, and so on and so forth, all in the light of trying to bring on this human progression or human growth. Salah takes the same form. Other forms of worship take the same exact form in the sense that it's meant to direct us towards a higher level of growth. And this level of growth is meant to bring within us a feeling of satisfaction whereby I have certainty in what I do. It's not meant to be where we come to the masjid for 30 nights or 15 nights and a speaker stands up here, gives a 15, 20 or 30-minute lecture and the crowd feels entertained through an emotional expression and we are to leave simply not having anything to engage our mental capacity. But there's got to be something deeper to why we come together during Ramadan. There's got to be some essence that we understand about our life and some sort of reality that we come to grips to, whereby we say that now I've changed my world view as a human in this Ramadan. Because truly, in all essence, and let's speak on a very human level, as much as our fasting benefits us, and as much as our salah benefits us, it's those moments in life, in the human being's life, whereby he changes the way he thinks, or the way he perceives something, or the way he understands something, and he comes to an enlightenment realizing, aha, now all of a sudden my fasting makes much more sense. And now all of a sudden my prayer makes much more sense because of that epiphany moment which I came to by changing the worldview which I have. And I would argue that as much as speaking about fasting is extremely important, changing that worldview which we live by, to me, is on an even more primary level and on a more basis level. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And I'd like to start the discussion and engage it by saying that the Quran hinges on this very aspect of coming together to question the reality which is around us and to ask basic, fundamental human questions. And throughout the next 7 or 8 nights, and I'm extremely honored to be here and I'd like to thank Shaykh Ilahi for having me. Within these next 7 or 8 nights, one of the themes is to provoke thought and thinking through the religion that we've been given, because there's a lot of room to think within Islam. There is no system where I give you the law and you accept, or I give you the specific ruling and you must follow, or here is the book, follow it word by word. But the beauty is that there is such room for thinking and improvement and understanding that to grasp onto this understanding brings this personal growth that we're talking about. And if you examine the Quran, there's a beautiful story which really depicts this, and specifically within the story of creation. Now whether Adam, when Allah speaks about him in the Quran, is the original man, or whether it's the concept of humanity, or the first product or the first creation which we all evolved from, that's put on the side. But when we look at the actual creation, when Allah decides to create an individual for the angels to bow down to or to prostrate to, interestingly, the angel's first reaction is, oh God, oh Allah, why is it that you're going to put someone on earth which we must worship when we're already worshipping you? Why should we prostrate to any human being? For what cause or for what reason? Because we're already doing that for you. There is no purpose for us to keep going further on that. And the point to highlight is that angels, interestingly, within Islamic thought, have a very exalted position whereby they act as the messengers of Allah throughout many tasks. For example, there's an angel who takes care of the hellfire or the heaven. There's an angel, for example, like Jibreel, who brings revelation down to the Messenger of Allah. And they're seen as individuals who have a very high status. Now, it's typically argued that the higher the status you have, the less questions or the less challenging you become to the authority figure. Where this very lesson is teaching us that Allah is saying, if I make a decision or a call and I am willing to allow an angel who has such a level of certainty in me to question my decision, to question what I have given them, and to contemplate and think about it, then what's your position as a human being on earth? Because let's think about it for a moment. Have we been given the ability to converse with Allah the way angels have been given? And we can answer and say no. Is there any sort of revelation between Jibreel and Muhammad which is happening between us where we are seeing this revelation? No. We're not seeing it at the level that they have seen it. Did we see Adam created and we were asked to bow down to Adam? No, we haven't seen any of these things. So our level of certainty or my level of realization in this world, we can argue that is at a lower level. Yet we ask such little questions and we engage our mental mind in such a small way when the Quran is telling us that even angels who have such high levels of certainty are asking and questioning. And it's interesting because Allah is not condemning them. Allah is not damning them and dooming them to hell and saying, because you're asking some sort of question about the decision which I have, then all of a sudden you deserve hellfire. No. Allah welcomes the question. Matter of fact, it's interesting to see that the creator of all the beautiful qualities which we have is willing to converse with an angel and say that I am willing to have conversation and dialogue back and forth with you. That intrigues me. It really does. Because it says that I'm willing to have this one-on-one conversation and there's room for thinking and understanding. Hence, sometimes when we say that, well, why is it that we question certain things? Or why is it that we raise certain questions about the lives that we live? We can come back and say that if angels within the Quran have the ability to ask Allah and really challenge certain decisions and calls, then what should we be doing? And at what level should we be asking? How many things should we be questioning? Because let's look at our reality. We've been placed on this earth, really being given a prophet who was living 1400 years ago. We have a Quran or a book that is very hard for many of us to connect to because it's from a past. We have certain realities and cultures and traditions, and we ask questions, basic questions like, why are we here? And what are we doing here? Why were we created? Why was I chosen from millions of people? And why is it that as a sister living in America I have to wear the scarf? Why is it as a brother living in America there are certain things which I can and cannot do? And we ask these basic questions, but maybe we need to ask deeper questions. Maybe there are things we haven't asked which we need to really ask and re-look and say, how can I have missed this reality which is so clear? But there's a specific essence which stops us sometimes. It's interesting. Because there's a thought that when I ask, or if I do ask, there's this emotional guilt inside of me which starts to kick in. Where I start feeling that if I do question something, and if I ask a basic question about a reality, it's either I'm going to be judged by my community or by my elders or people around me, or very simply I can't let go of a belief or start to question the belief without having some sort of doubt in my heart. There's this guilt which is eating me. Even if the idea makes no sense whatsoever, even if it has no Quranic basis or Hadith basis, and I've accepted it and I've put it in my life, I feel some sort of guilt inside my heart that how could I have rejected this? And we grow this emotional attachment. It's not really attachment to the principle or the practicality of the idea, but the attachment, it's the actual belief itself, which holds no merit. Holding an emotional attachment to a belief rather than the practical application and the end result has no merit. And I'll give you a brief example. As a human being who might come in Ramadan, and we all do this, alhamdulillah, it's an amazing practice, that we come together in Ramadan as a community and we recite the Quran, which is a very, very noble thing to do. It's a beautiful thing to do. When we come and recite the Quran, many a times our focus and our emotional attachment is simply to the book, which is the physical Quran. And I can't see deeper, I can't look deeper than the actual book which is in my hands. I am limited as a human being to the book, which is the paper and the ink, which is inside this volume. And that's what I'm limited to. And I have this great feeling that I'll come to the Quran, I'll recite it, and I'll get up feeling good simply because I've recited it. I feel better, I feel more religious. What's the proof to that? What's the proof that we do it and we feel good because we're simply reciting? Is that after Ramadan we don't touch the Quran. We don't hold it, we don't see it, we don't understand, we don't think about its verses. And then when I say recite the Quran, you don't have to literally sit there and open page by page, which is good to do, but at times simply thinking of a concept and trying to see what the Quranic perspective is thinking about the Quran. And what I'm doing in this case is I've built an emotional attachment to the actual physical book, but there's no attachment to the principles behind the book. And we do the same with our ideologies. Our ideologies at times are the exact same. It's like if I was to go to India, and I was to speak to a Hindu who has a specific belief about God or a cow being holy. That person, from my point of view, or my perspective, might not have any logical basis to his argument. Maybe he does, but from my Muslim perspective, he might not. But that individual holds an emotional attachment to his argument simply because that's the way human beings are created. We hold emotional attachments. Unless we break this attachment, where now I'm not simply attached to the idea, but I'm attached to something so much deeper than the idea, that the idea can be discarded, the idea is irrelevant, the idea is not regarded in the price of getting to the truth. My aim is I want to get to the truth. If this idea doesn't make sense to me, or it does not sit in my mind well, then let me be human enough, let me be real enough, let me be strong enough with myself and say, I don't believe this. I don't. And there are basic questions which we sometimes don't ask. And I'd like to bring these up within the next 7 nights and hopefully try to answer some things. Realities which we might know and think about in the back of our brains, but we never bring them forward. Simple examples. I'll give you one example. Is a lot of the time we discuss the concept of Imam al-Mahdi, and we say, well, where is Imam Mahdi? It's been 1400 or 1200 years ever since he disappeared. Now, when is he coming back? And if he's waiting for us to grow, then there are 7 billion people on this earth. And there cannot be 313 generals from 7 billion who can help him or help his army in some way. Let's ask a deeper question. If imamate is such an important discussion, and it is in our circles, then why is it that the imam cannot help us in any way in today's form? Now we say, well, imam helps us, he's there, he's around us, he's helping us, but we cannot see the help that he's giving us. That's the argument that we typically give. And let's be human enough to say, does this make sense? Is there maybe a deeper understanding to this discussion about Mahdi which we're missing? Is there something which we're not realizing or seeing? Basic questions. And sometimes we ask and say, well, how many should die? And how much corruption should happen before somebody rises and says something? Was 60 million not enough in World War II? Was the amount of people who died in World War I not enough? How much should happen? Or how much destruction should happen? Basic human questions. If we hold on to an idea, let's not kid ourselves and say that I believe in this because someone told me. You are not what other people tell you to believe. You are what you believe as a human being. It's as simple and plain as that. No more than that. We are what we believe and not what others tell us to believe. That's the basic human fundamental question. That's why you have philosophers like Socrates and Aristotle, Descartes, others who said, you know what, put aside what people have been telling me to believe. What do I believe? What's my basic human intuition telling me? At times we belittle this. What's wrong with us giving our opinions as human beings and saying, you know what, let me give my opinion on this issue. Because Islam is much more than laws given to us or derived from primary texts which are going to change our lives. It's our own personal journey or growth that we may have. Look at the Quran as an example. If you look at the Quran, we examine really to the depth and the core, what is religion, or what is the discussion on religion, you'll find that there is 2 different realities which we live by. 2 different mainstream realities. One is the human reality which exists at all times, and that's the human power of growth. There's a reality amongst us which is meant to grow. That's our human potential. You and I are not the laws of the Quran. You and I are not the laws of the Imams. We are much deeper than that. We are humans and we are meant to bring out the values which are inside of us. That's a much deeper discussion. But if you look at the way that religion is structured, is that throughout the ages, you'll find a religion like Christianity or Judaism or Islam all come for a very similar purpose. Very, very similar purpose. And that purpose is to bring out the human reality which is inside of us. Now, no longer am I a human being stagnant where I'm believing something which is not applicable to me, but Islam is meant to bring out a reality which is inside of me. And that's why throughout the ages you'll find different religions have come to different people, simply for the idea that people living in different times need different laws under different applications and different miracles and different understandings. Look at something basic like the miracle system. A person, for example, like Jesus will get a miracle which is bringing the dead back alive. A person like, for example, Nabi Muhammad will get a miracle which is a Quran which has a lot of potential, which is a book of poetry, which is a book which is much higher than the poetry that the people had during that time. Why is it different? Why is the circumstance different? Because the laws and the times of the people are completely different. Now what Islam and other religions are meant to do is to address the human reality. It's a tool to bring out the reality of the human being, the deeper inner insights of the human. Allah could have given us one religion from the time of Adam and says, up until the day you die, from 10 million years from now, you all will use the same religion. But the wisdom of Allah is that because times are changing and there is a new system in place, human beings are advancing, technology is advancing, your lifestyles and what you're impressed by is advancing, now religion will also advance with you. And then we have the beliefs that Ibrahim came with. In principle, were the same as the beliefs of Nabi Muhammad, but application-wise, they were different. The principles of Judaism are the same as Islam in their original essence, but their application is different. Why is that? It's because Allah is saying the rules are irrelevant. What's relevant is your human growth, it's your potential and your capacity. Don't put anything aside for that growth and that capacity. Now what we've done at times is we've flipped the equation. We've made the rule and the law much more important than the growth that it gives within us. Let me give you a basic example. And this is something that I encountered about 2 or 3 days ago. There was a young sister in our community, and I just want to show you, give you an example of how at times we take the law and we make it the end goal versus making the growth of the human being the end goal. When we make the growth the end goal in our discussions, that's when we flourish as humans, not the other way around. Let me give a basic example when it comes to hijab. There was a young sister I was talking to, and she comes to me very young, about 10 years old, and she says, look, I want to talk to you. I said, okay. She says, I've been having a problem, and my parents are putting me in a situation. Very young, but very smart and very sharp. So I said, what's going on? She says, when I was about 9, so a year ago, my mother approached me and said, I want you to wear hijab. Example of how the law might be given to a person without acknowledging their human growth. I said, go ahead. She says, my mother told me to wear the hijab, and I was very hesitant to wear it. As a matter of fact, didn't want to wear it. And she's being very completely honest. And I said, well, what happened? She said, I went to the school, and she's telling me this, and she's sobbing. This happened to me. And I went to school, I put on the scarf, I went to school, and everyone in my school is making fun of me. Everyone is making fun of me. And she came sitting traumatized that I can't believe that all my friends are making fun of me and now I'm wearing the hijab. And I said to her, well, how did you feel when your friends did that to me? And the 10-year-old typically will say to you, well, I felt embarrassed, I felt like I didn't fit in, I felt I felt really sad. But this girl looks at me and says, I felt crushed. I thought, wow, crushed is a very big emotional word for a 10-year-old to use. I was crushed. And I thought, well, why are you feeling so crushed? What's the deal? She says, because my mom really didn't convince me to wear it. She made me wear it. She forced me to wear it. She simply put the scarf on one day and said, okay, Habibti, put on the scarf, go to school, and then I'll see you tomorrow. And the girl had no idea, well, what is this? What's it supposed to do to me? What's the human capacity? What's the growth that it brings in me? Why should I wear it? What's the point? Can I at least get a say or decision? As in, do I get to wear it? Do I not get to wear it? Do I have a choice in the discussion? And the way that we approach matters at times is the law is given to you and there is no room for question. There is no room for thinking, well, what's in it for me? What's my personal growth? Where do I stand in this? It's simply a mechanical system of haram and halal, and there's no question in between. And that's a big problem because it removes human responsibility. My responsibility and your responsibility as a free-thinking human being, which is meant to come to his own logical conclusions, at times can be halted simply because there is such a strong and firm law system. I'm not saying let's get rid of the law system. It's important to have the boundaries. But for God's sakes, let's take the laws and say, is this law beneficial to me? Does it do anything for me? Is it helping me in any way possible? What's it doing for me? Let me give you a basic scenario. And the way we look at haram and halal is quite interesting, because to us it's simply a system of mechanics, and I'd like to kind of challenge that. I remember when I was younger, specifically as a teenager, my dad's words to me when I got into high school was, Ali, make sure you're very careful of things like fornication, adultery, because they bring poverty to the household. And many times within our Islamic circles we say that if a human being does commit adultery or does fornicate, then that brings on poverty. God will make you very poor. And I remember living my high school years in this state of trepidation. Like, my God, I've got to be so careful. I've got to make sure that I'm watching in every corner. I never want to fall into this because I don't want my dad to get poor. I don't want my family to go through poverty. I enjoy the things I have in life, and I really don't want this to happen to me as a human being. And I was stuck in this notion that the minute you do something haram, there's a mechanical which is, the minute you do something haram, there's a mechanical which is going to destroy the way you live. And we have this concept. For example, the other day, a young girl comes to me and she says, brother, someone told me that if I don't wear the scarf, God will hang me by my hair. And I thought, oh my God, if this is the system that we're teaching our kids and this is how they're growing up, don't expect this child in 10 years to keep on the scarf. Don't expect them in 20 years to read the Quran. Don't expect them in 15 years to not fornicate, because when they do grow out of that give me candy or give me lollipop stage and they get into the really philosophical and intellectual stage and somebody challenges them, then they start thinking, well, why can God hang me? And is God that, does He judge that way? Then as I grew older, I realized there is nothing to do with poverty or God making me poor. It's got nothing to do with the system of what God gives me or God doesn't give me. The reason why people stay away from adultery or fornication is because it goes against my human reality of growth. Go to Detroit and go to all the areas where there are single mothers and their kids have to be raised without a father. Think about the trepidation and all of the consequences that might have. Even though my heart goes out to those mothers who are doing an amazing job at raising young children, and it's not easy to raise as a young mother a child, there are consequences. When I saw that, when I lived in that atmosphere, I told myself, well, you know what? Now I know why adultery is so bad. Now I know why fornication is so bad. It's not that God is going to damn me, doom me, throw me in hell. It goes against my personal reality of growth. And I don't grow as a human being. And I tell my students this all the time. I tell them, let me ask you a basic human question. Very basic. If haram and halal was to not exist, and it was thrown out the window completely. Forget religion for a second. Put it aside. Forget haram and halal for a second. Put it aside. Would you still refrain from the things which your parents or religion might tell you to refrain from? And why? Because now you become a free-thinking human being. I'm not saying religion limits us, but what happens is we get so caught up in the do's and don'ts. It's like we're a group of soccer players who have focused so much on the mechanics of don't kick the ball out, don't move the ball this way, don't do this, or we're playing basketball, don't double dribble, don't travel, don't shoot this way, don't move this way. We've forgotten the point of the game, which is to score. And that's what's happened to us as a community. We've become so focused on the mechanics, which are at a point important, that we've forgotten the main message, which is to think about the mechanics that we've been given. And a lot of the times when we look deeper into this, we'll see it's not about haram and halal. It's more about my personal growth as a human being. The same way it's not about me going into heaven or hell. A lot of times many people are so caught up in the idea that God's going to burn me, or God's going to torture me, or God's going to put me in heaven, or God's going to put me in hell. Well, for a second, put that aside. That works at a very basic level. At a basic level, when you look at a child and you tell him, don't do this because here are the consequences, the child for 5 or 10 years might stop that act. But then when the child grows older, you can't tell him, I'm going to whip you, or beat you, or I'm going to take your PlayStation away from you, or you can't go to your friend's house. These things don't work. All of a sudden, the child has to have a built-in understanding system whereby he knows, I can't do this because it's bad for me. I can't do this because it doesn't allow me to grow. I can't do this because there's no benefit for me in this discussion. And if we look at heaven and hell the same way, it's not about going to heaven or going to hell. It's more about my personal progression. If we can look deeper, much deeper than the vision of I'm doing this simply for my religion. I'm doing this for my humanity, for my growth as a human being. And religion is that tool which brings out my humanity. It's a perfect set of system of laws which brings me closer and changes my situation. Let me give a final example and I'll conclude. If we look at the life of the messenger, it's quite interesting. You see a man who comes into Arabia geographically. Have we ever asked the question that who was Arabia taken over by, or who was it colonized by within that time? Because we know there was the Persian Empire and the Byzantine Empire. And Arabia, within that time period, as Dr. Ali Shari'ati states, was never really occupied by anyone because it was such an arid, dry, disgusting, disturbing area which had so many crimes and theft and lack of understanding and lack of human values and lack of human moral empathy that no one really wanted to take over Arabia. It was simply a land which was there. It was just there. People didn't even want to waste their time to go over and take it over because it really had nothing there. And the miracle is that you have a man which is the best of society, a man who really comes forward like the Messenger of Allah, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this man comes to an Arabian society and takes the same area which was not colonized by any human being because they were so disgusted by that area, completely goes there, changes it, revolutionizes it, and that same very land, the same land which nobody wanted to touch, controlled today's about 23 or 28 of today's modern countries. Look at the power that the system of law that the messenger came with did. Now we have to ask a basic question. The system of law that he came to change the individuals in the society, did it change them? Did it bear the fruits which it was meant to? And the answer is yes. Look at simple, basic things that the messenger changed. Simple examples as women were buried alive and that was no more. Women were taken as slaves and that was no more. Women were to be inherited, that was no more. If a person was to buy something, he had to contract. A man could not kill another man. A man could not trade. Basic human values which completely civilized this uncivilized Arabian society. And it worked because their situation grew. It changed them. They became different human beings. Let's take the same context. How much is Islam doing for us today? Or how much is our understanding of Islam doing for us today? Because look at the situation of the Muslim world. Look at the situation of our ummah. It's in such a tough state. It's in shambles. You travel sometimes to certain Middle Eastern countries and you see poverty, corruption, lack of understanding, very, very small benefits, no healthcare, no basic human rights, no education in many areas, and specifically the countries that we might be from, it's that way. And the question that we ask, if Islam bear the fruits to change the society 1400 years ago, what is it going to take for it to bear the same fruit today? What do we have to do? Do we have to change the understanding? Should we revolutionize our worldviews? Let's ask a basic question. Why are the same results not being seen today? Where are the same results which we saw 1400 years ago, which revolutionized the society? And what's the reason that the same change isn't happening today? That's a fundamental question to ask. It's a very important question to ask. Ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to strengthen us and to keep us on the path of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. هذا والحمد لله رب العالمين صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Thank you very much, Brother Ali. Beautiful, beautiful speech. Very enlightening. I hope all you guys tell all your friends and family members on Facebook, on social networks, etc., about the great speeches we're going to have here. We're going to have Brother Ali for the next 6 days here at the Islamic House of Wisdom, inshallah.